docketing system. So everybody goes to this one court. We have judges, I think, as Margaret Mirella said earlier, right? We need hardworking judges that show up to the courthouse so that when the presiding judge calls the case and they're ready for their case to be heard, many of our cases do get settled or they get resolved in one way or another, but obviously not every case gets resolved or settled outside of the court system. So they show up to this courtroom and they let us know what they need from the court in terms of how much time they need to present their case to a judge, and then the judge assigns the case to another judge that's available to help hear these cases. So whoever it is here again that becomes the next judge of the 73rd will be doing that. So the centralized docket system is a very unique system. In my view, there's and in everybody's view, I would think, there's ups, there's pluses, there's minuses. I think as a whole, the numbers and the efficiency of it works very, very well. But again, I'm certainly, as a sitting judge, know that there's good aspects of it, and there's not. So all that to say, one of the questions from our members was, what is your attitude about the presiding system, and is there any way you feel we can make it better? I'm going to start with you, Ms. Villaseñor Hernandez.
So practicing all around the state of Texas, I have cases that are pending in courts where it is one judge that handles the case from beginning to end. And I'll tell you that sometimes that can be very frustrating for me, because if I have an issue that I need to resolve and get set for hearing, I may not be able to get a hearing for 2.5 months. And so having to call my client and explain to them that I cannot move their case forward because the judge is not available until mid-January is very hard for them to understand. And so when I am able, as the plaintiff, right now, I can choose what venue, what county to file my cases in. And so anytime I have the opportunity to file here, if this is the more favorable venue, I will file here, because I can tell the client, look, if we ever have any issues, we have this presiding court system where I can get a hearing, that same week, if not, sooner, to get this issue resolved. And so that can be very efficient in some cases. But I also understand that there are other times I have had very complex cases where we have an issue come up every 2 to 3 weeks. And so having to go down to the courthouse and get a new judge assigned and having to tell them, hey, I need at least 10 to 15 minutes to explain the history of the case, the prior rulings made by other judges, can sometimes be difficult to do. But like I said, I think the presiding court system here in Bexar County can be very efficient, can keep our cases moving, which I think is necessary to run an efficient docket.
Right, Ms. Ramirez.
Yes, so whenever I travel around Texas and I say I'm from Bexar County, everybody's like, oh, you have that weird presiding system. I personally love it, I guess because I'm used to it for the last 30 years. That's what I've been doing. That it seems unusual when I go to other courts and I have to wait 6 months before I can get a trial setting. So I think it is very efficient. I think there's positives and negatives, just like in anything. But I think, in my opinion, and not that it's up to me, because I'm not going to decide whether presiding stays there or not, but it's not my decision to make. But I think there's more positive than negative. And to me, it also has impacted, in my opinion, the camaraderie of the attorneys. Being in presiding court, seeing everybody every morning, being able to confer and being pushed to, there's this number of judges, there's this number of cases, y'all are going to have to talk. You're going to have to confer and see what you can narrow down. I think with the presiding system, it just lends itself to letting attorneys work together better and having a camaraderie. I can say, having practiced in a lot of places around Texas, Bexar County attorneys, we're just, I think, special, and everybody seems to get along better. When I have cases in Houston or Dallas, I'm amazed at how, not nice they are to each other. So, but anyway, that's my opinion about presiding.
Ms. Martinez.
Thank you. So presiding court in Bexar County, we have an 84% clearance rate of our cases that are filed yearly, just last year alone. And I have to attribute that to the presiding system. I do think that there's pros and cons, but I really enjoy presiding. I think it really moves the cases quickly. As far as any way to make it better, what I would like to see is that we have a more efficient way of getting the orders to the presiding court judge. So that way the attorneys are not having to email civil intern 1 and then appear on Zoom and that. So I think there are some ways to make it run a little bit faster and get the orders into the attorney's hands quicker, and that is what I would like to see for presiding. Thank you.
Thank you. One last thing tidbit, and there's many aspects of the document system. In the centralized docketing system, we do not have court coordinators or people that run our dockets for us to set hearings. So that's part of the pro, and also a little bit of the con is that lawyers essentially decide when to set their cases for hearing. I don't have a clerk, or with a few small exceptions on cases here and there, very rarely does the decision about when to set a case come from me or any of my other colleagues. We do have a few cases that does happen on, but for the most part, either the lawyer will decide when to schedule it, usually, and hopefully might confer with the other lawyer, but they get a chance for the most part to say, I want this hearing set for next Friday, and they get to set it. In other counties and other jurisdictions, you got to call that court and that coordinator maybe, or that clerk, and say, when can I get a hearing? And that's why when you hear these issues that happen in other jurisdictions versus ours, where they say we can't get a hearing for 3 months, that's because the court coordinator decides what gets set for hearing in front of the judge, whether it actually gets heard in some levels, meaning whether it gets continued sometimes or not. For the most part, we allow the lawyers. It's a very lawyer-driven notice type of system. So anyway, all right. The next question again is one from our members, and it's an interesting question. And I'll say, as somebody that this year has been sick quite a bit, unfortunately, what do you think is a reasonable amount of time a judge should take off from work, whether sick or vacation days? So I say it's a loaded question. I'm asking it from a member. If that's one of you out there, I will tell you, I've had COVID this year and I was out for 2 weeks. So if I had something that limited me, I don't know how I would have done it. I suppose I'd have showed up and infected everybody, and plus I had another pretty serious issue earlier this year. But all that to say, that's the question. So I'm going to start with Ms. Macedonia. Go for it.
I mean, as far as sick days, I would say generally it's a week that's allowed per year. I'll tell you that I don't think I've taken sick days in several years. I work at a firm where it's like, okay, if you can't come into work, I'm sure you're okay to do it from home. So especially since COVID, having the ability to do things on Zoom has made it pretty simple. And again, unless you're really sick and in bed, which of course happens, and if you need to take the time off, then I think even as a judge we should be allowed to do that. But otherwise, I think there's ways around that.
Ms. Ramirez?
So in 2021, I had an illness and I was out for a while. And interestingly, I can't tell you how many attorneys, but probably 20 to 25 lawyers started taking my cases and doing my hearings on my behalf, not taking my cases, but helping me. And so I think every situation is different. I think we always talk about, as lawyers, a reasonable standard. What's reasonable? Well, if you have a severe illness, it might be reasonable to be out for a month or two. If you have long COVID, it's possible. There's lots of different variables, but I think generally speaking, I would be motivated by the judges that I see. I've had judges that we have hearings until 10 o'clock at night because we need to get it done. It needs to be over. I've had juries where I think, and I hate to keep going back to this one jury trial, but I think we waited for a jury panel until almost 11 o'clock at night. I was at the courthouse at 11 p.m. waiting for a jury to give their verdict. Yep. So I think judges do whatever they need to do, but I think we also have to be reasonable and know that there are times, as in my situation, where when you're truly ill, and I appeared on Zoom from my hospital bed when I needed to, and I mediated cases from my hospital room. So anyway, I think it's just a case-by-case basis, and everybody deserves that respect of, whatever is needed at that moment, as long as it's reasonable. So,
Ms. Martinez.
Thank you. I think civil district court judges have a very hard job. They handle cases day in, day out, and some may require them to stay late till 11 at night or come in early to try to do a motion to enter. So I think that we have to treat the time off with a little bit of grace and compassion. If somebody's really sick, then there may be some leeway for that. As far as vacation, I think 2 weeks is pretty standard for any kind of job. I mean, we are public servants, but I do think that we have to have time to compress and to have time with your families and all of those things, the things that attorneys and you would want from your own jobs. So I would like to have that same kind of compassion for our civil district court judges. I wish I could give you a temporal time on that, but it's going to change from judge to judge. But that's what elections are for, right?
And just so y'all know, right, we also have the ability to call in visiting judges to help assist with the docket whenever we're out for one reason or another. We are, as judges, and y'all, again, whoever ends up assuming the bench will end up having to take continuing education courses. We're actually required to take a certain number of family violence courses. Otherwise, we don't get to continue keeping our job, if you will. So those are things that under our system, for the most part, as being someone that's had to lean on my colleagues and as one that my colleagues have leaned on, so far we've done as masterful a job as we can to support each other to make sure our cases continue to move at a rate that really is higher than almost any other jurisdiction in the state. All right, this is a question that was asked. I probably should have asked it a little bit earlier. I was trying to kind of reconfigure this a bit, but if there's any gaps you want to fill, feel free, or if you don't, because you've already answered it, then we can move on to the next one. But this question is, are there any particular processes that you feel we can make more efficient at the courthouse? Ms. Ramirez, I'll start with you.
gosh, there's, I guess efficiency, things are always changing. There's always a way to make things better. I don't assume to believe that I would have the sole power to change the presiding system. But one of the things that I think, as far as a suggestion, is to have some uniform rules. So I'm going to give an example, and she's a good friend of mine, so I don't mind saying her name, Judge Karen Poza. When she was in presiding, you could not call in a conferring announcement. You had to be present. So sometimes you would tell the other attorney, hey, we're going to mark our case conferring, and then we weren't able to because that was the rule for that month. And then the next month, the rule might be different. And so if there was some uniformity maybe, and the judges talking about, hey, this is going to be our policy, or this is going to be how we're going to handle this. And so to me, that might be a suggestion. But I surely don't believe that even, as the judge for the 73rd, I'm going to have the power to change anything. It just may be a suggestion.
Ms. Martinez.
Thank you. So in addition to what I talked about, having the ability to not email anymore and everything go through the e-file Texas system, which we have the capability to do, it's just a matter of organizing the district clerk and the judges together to do that. That's what I think would really help our attorneys be more efficient, and there's no reason why attorneys should have to wait 5 to 7 business days to get a copy of their order. That's just, we can overcome that. And that's really my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Villasenora Hernandez.
Yes, I think that that's probably one that we see most often is submitting things to the district clerk and then being able to access them. Getting a signed order back. I think is one of the frustrating parts for us as attorneys and our staff, because usually we're not sitting there waiting for it, and so if a day or two goes by and I'm following up with my assistant, like, why don't we have this? If there was a way that everybody could access that information, I think that would definitely make it much more efficient.
All right, we're going to shift a little bit away from some of the processes and orient and stuff and get a little bit more of a holistic view of who you are. Member question, are you involved in any work in the community? And if so, what, Ms. Villasenora Hernandez?
Well, so I guess one of my biggest projects in the community is something that I started back in 2016. Like I said, I'm a first-generation Mexican-American, but I'm also the first attorney in my family. And so when I first became an attorney, I realized, how would it have been if I knew about this at a younger age? And so I took on becoming the regional coordinator for a Texas high school mock trial competition here in San Antonio. And so in 2016, I met with the Dallas Bar Association that puts it on in Dallas, and I was able to start working on it here in San Antonio. And originally it was supposed to be 2 of us, but like 3 weeks in, she said, "I'm sorry, my boss said it's going to take too much time and I can't do it." And so I've been doing it ever since. And every year I have anywhere from 9 to 12 high schools from around San Antonio. It's expanded, and now we have all the way Bernie, Kerrville, Livonia, Pleasanton, all of them participate in the competition. And so we have February 9th, 2024 is our next one. I invite these high schools, and they come to the courthouse, and because of some of the judges that are sitting here today, they allow me to use their courtrooms. And so we give them that experience. I have local attorneys and judges that help me judge the competition. And throughout the years, it's gotten much more support from our legal community. So I have law firms that sponsor. Last year, we were able to give away 10 laptops to the students, which for many of us is just a laptop, right? But for some of them, this is the only electronic device in their household. And so to see that and to make that difference to these students is something that I really enjoy doing.
Thank you. Ms. Martinez.
Yes, so I am very active in my community. I go to career days and talk about being a judge at municipal court and what it's like to be a staff attorney. I am also first gen, so I am glad to be able to give back in that way. One long-term community project that I've been doing is I am a mentor to a juvenile probationer. She's 16, and I took her on, and we do that on the weekend. So I help her through whatever struggles that she has, and we've been doing that. We've become very close, so I'm very happy to have that one-on-one direct contact with, unfortunately, she found herself in a criminal situation, so I am there to guide her along the way so she can have somebody to look up to and talk to.
Thank you. Ms. Ramirez, my apologies.
That's okay.
Not again.
So I have quite a bit of, there's so much I would like to say, but I guess the highlights are that the one that I'm probably most proud of is I was the president of the Warren Athletic Booster Club while my kids were in high school. And so I got to raise quite a bit of money for scholarships for our students at Warren High School here in San Antonio. When I took over the position, and believe me, that was a stressful election because there were people involved who weren't necessarily dealing with the money in the correct way. And so when they saw an interloper like me want to come in and fix it and, try to figure out what was going on, it was probably the most vicious election I've ever heard of. But anyway, I won, and I became president of the Booster Club. And the first year we raised $75,000, and when I took over, they owed $5,000. So that tells you a little bit about how all of that went. So we were able to raise that money not only to give scholarships, but to get better equipment for our students, to just make the high school better. We had a beautification project of just making the high school nicer and prettier and making sure our kids had the best equipment, just like all the other Northside schools. The other stuff that I'm involved in is, like, I'm president of the Family Law Bar Association. I've been in that association for some time, and I was privileged to be voted as the president of the Family Law Bar. The Hispanic Law Alumni for St. Mary's Law School, I'm the president this year. That organization I've been a part of for quite some time, and our real exciting thing that we do is we raise money for our students, for St. Mary's Law students that really, really need it. Many of those young adults have come up to me and said what a difference that $1,000 or $2,000 has made in their life. And so that's something that I'm also very proud of. Additionally, as the president of the Hispanic Law Alumni Association, we have a mentor-mentee program. So what I try to do is we have different events where if you're interested in going into family law, I'm going to find a family law attorney to mentor you so you can shadow them. I have two young adults right now that go with me to court. And I don't make them carry my bags and all that. I mean, they're actually really learning, dealing with people, seeing the negotiation process, seeing how presiding court works. And, they're just amazed because, they say, well, I want to be a lawyer, but what is it really about? And most of us in here who are lawyers know in law school, they don't really teach you about the day-to-day, how to be a lawyer kind of thing. You learn torts and, all of that. So those are the things, among other. I'm just the lucky one, right? Each time. So anyway, but among other things, those are the things that I think I'm the most proud of, is really making a difference in young adults' lives, and of course in the high school level as well. And so that's my community involvement.
All right, thank you. We've got just a few more questions to go, ladies and gentlemen, so thanks for your patience. Ms. Ramirez, who was your mentor as a newly licensed attorney, and what did he or she teach you that you try to pass on to others and or will never forget?
So I had many. One of them that comes to mind, and I promise I'm not trying to single out one of our judges, but Pete Torres was my mentor. Yes, he was. So he also always wanted to invite me to lunch. And so I really wanted to, meet him because we only spoke over the phone for quite a long time. And every time I had a case with him, and he said, anytime you have a question, and he was so easy to talk to and call, and he knew everything, and he knew everyone. And so when I would tell him, I have this opposing counsel, I don't know what to do, or how do I do this, or what should I say, or he would totally help. And so that is the first person that comes to mind.
Ms. Martinez.
She's not here right now, but Sonia Rodriguez was my mentor, and she picked up every phone call and she walked me through everything from beginning to end. And the lesson that she imparted with me is the habits and the processes that you do as a young attorney, you're gonna do for the rest of your career, so get it right at the beginning. And I am forever indebted to her. She is phenomenal, and I can't say enough good things about her.
Thank you. Ms. Villaseñor Hernandez.
So as a young lawyer at a defense firm, most of my bosses were men. And one of them was Nick Mameri, and he took me under his wing. And as a young female attorney working on trucking litigation, it was a very eye-opening experience because there are a lot of men in that world, and it's not very welcoming to young female attorneys. And so he constantly reminded me that as long as I was prepared, and sometimes I needed to be over-prepared, that it didn't matter. It didn't matter what they said to me. It didn't matter what they thought of me. I needed to go into that hearing more prepared than they were. And it worked every time. So.
All right. What is something unique about you that you will bring to the bench, Ms. Villaseñor Hernandez?
Well, first of all, my name rhymes with unique, and so I think that's the easy way to remember it. So, but I think for me, as a first-generation Mexican American, Spanish is my first language, and so I don't know if any of you are Spanish speakers, but for me, I even think in Spanish sometimes, and so when it comes to Spanish-speaking litigants, whether they're pro se or whether they're represented by attorneys, I think that is something that I can bring, making sure that when they come into the courtroom, they know that they have somebody sitting at the bench that understands them, and that they can make sure that I am listening to what they are saying and making sure that they are heard.
Ms. Ramirez.
So I think what makes me unique amongst these candidates is just my life experience. Without telling you how old I am, I have over 50 plus years of life experience, and I think life experience is very important to a judge. Also, of course, almost 3 decades of legal experience, I think just sort of sets me apart. And so that's what I think makes me unique.
Ms. Martinez.
What makes me unique is that I bring to the bench a knowledge of what it's like to support a bench, to work for 14 civil district court judges who rely on their trusted advisor, and to actually be on the bench. So I'm the only candidate here that is actually a part-time judge for the city of San Antonio and working at the courthouse daily, being a trusted advisor and analyzing the problems of all of the cases that come through the door.
All right, so we've got a bit of a fun question here. And it's our last question from the membership. What is your superpower?
I can go first.
Go ahead, Ms. Villasenor Hernandez. I wasn't sure where to go with that because I thought, I don't know that I have a superpower, but if I did, it probably would be telekinesis.
I don't know if it's a superpower, but I have a photographic memory. So I can remember Bates numbers, I can remember pictures. I tell my staff, if I tell you that we have something, it's because I saw it and I can remember what is redlined, what is highlighted. Yes, so that's my superpower.
Ms. Martinez.
My superpower is being able to juggle my full-time job, my part-time job, my husband who's a paramedic and gone 24 hours at a time every 4th day, and raise my 2 kids, my 8-year-old and 2-year-old, and able to do that and still function. That's my superpower.
Ms. Ramirez.
So my superpower is, I guess, being a mom and having been able to juggle my career with being a mom. I never missed an event for any of my kids. I was always there. I was able to raise teenagers without a whole lot of, damage. And I was able to navigate kids who wanted to be involved in everything. I would tell the kids, like, gosh, do we have to do every sport every season? And just a real quick story. I remember opening up my son's gym bag one day, and this whiff of air filled the car, and I said, "What is that?" And he says, "Mom, that's the smell of victory." So being a sports mom, being a football mom, being, and all of that, to me, I think is my superpower.
All right, thank you. So those are the end of the questions. What I'm going to do is give you all about 30 seconds to just kind of give your final spiel to the membership and people in the audience here who are your potential voters as to why they should consider you as the candidate for the 73rd to vote for. So Ms. Villasenor Hernandez, I'll start with you.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate getting the opportunity to speak to you all. Again, I think my experience as a plaintiff and defense attorney gives me some unique perspective that I can bring to this bench. Something that is often overlooked, even though, like Judge Canales said, it may only be 25 to 30% of the docket, but some of those cases are the most complex cases that come through the courthouse. The biggest case that I handled was a $250 million case, where we did over 75 depositions in that case, and we were able to settle it the night before trial started. And honestly, those cases were the ones that gave me the most experience. Even though we didn't get to try it, we handled all of the expert motions and things like that I think gives me that experience that you want in a judge. Thank you.
Ms. Ramirez?
So I think I've tried to cover as much as I could today, but just having the life experience of being in that court that I'm going to hopefully be the judge of, being in the presiding court, I don't need any on-the-job training. I've been there every day for almost 30 years. So I don't, sometimes new judges come in and they observe presiding to see how to manage the docket and so forth. I don't need that on-the-job training. I have it. I'm there every day. And so I think that is one of the reasons that I should be considered. And something that I think is also really important is that I probably, have had thousands of cases and almost dealt with almost every attorney in San Antonio sometimes, I feel like. And they will all tell you that my demeanor that I have practiced with for 30 years is going to be the demeanor that I will have as a judge. And so I think also not just knowledge and experience, but how am I going to treat the lawyers in my courtroom? How am I going to treat the people in my courtroom? And I have the proven experience of how I deal with people, even when we're adversaries. And so I think that's something that I would ask for all of y'all to consider.
Ms. Martinez.
Thank you. So thank you again for listening to all of us and answering your questions. I am coming to you with the lived experience of having grown up here on the West Side, going through all of the struggles of my family, and I am so proud to be a candidate for the 73rd and fulfill this legacy that I have instilled in myself since I was young. So I bring to you the knowledge of what it's like to work on plaintiffs' cases, defense cases, family law cases, and the day-to-day minutia of being there at the staff attorney's office, being a trusted advisor to all of the 14 civil district court judges, and as well as my judicial experience being on the bench and supporting a bench. So with me, you get a well-rounded candidate that has seen everything, seen every case, given opinions on every case, litigated the cases, and I am ready for this next step to fulfill this legacy and to serve the citizens of Bexar County, because that is who this bench belongs to. Thank you.
One last thing, and this was on me. I was going to open up the floor to a few questions from the audience. Is there any question from the audience? Raise your hand. Go ahead, Ms. Holmes.
There's no more men left, and I think that it's very important to have a diverse bench. So how do you guys think you will be able to handle that when the fathers come in? If you believe you can not be biased with all of you being mothers, or do you think that'll be something that'll be challenging for you?
Ms. Martinez? Sure, as best as I can. Basically, how would they, knowing that many fathers come into the courtroom, how do they feel they can best be fair to fathers, knowing that they're mothers and that essentially they're coming to the bench not as having experience as a father? So, Ms. Martinez?
Thank you. So my first position with the county was a staff attorney for the Domestic Relations Office, and I represented several fathers who were being denied visitation rights. So I come with the perspective of what it is like to be a father who's being denied visitation rights. That, as far as fathers between mothers, and if one has a special step above another, does not equate with the law, and I will follow the law.
Ms. Ramirez.
Yes, so I just did a video for my social media on this issue. I've represented lots of dads over the years. Equal number probably between moms and dads. In fact, I think for a while I had more dads calling me because I got the reputation of getting dads custody. And so to me, it is not about gender. It's going to be solely based on who is the better parent. And because I'm an amicus attorney, my focus is the best interest of the child. So it doesn't matter if you're a mom or you're a dad. I've seen lots of ladies who believe because they're the mom, they should automatically win. That's not the case. It's about the best interest of that child or those children, and who is the better parent, who can provide the better, more stable home, who can provide the needs of the children, who has a plan for the children. What is their plan? Is it a viable plan? There's so many factors that I look at as an amicus that I feel that unique experience is going to help, because it's not about gender.
Ms. Villaseñor Hernandez.
Yes, I agree with both of them. I think it has to be on a case-by-case basis. And so no father is going to walk into the courtroom and be, at a lesser footing than the mother just because they're the father. I think every case needs to be considered as far as what the father can provide and what the mother can provide. And ultimately, it's up to, the judge to decide what's in the best interest of the child.
All right. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, Ms. Tamez. Why don't you?
I can talk loud, I think.
Are you sure you can talk loud? She can. I can vouch as having had her in my courtroom. She can definitely talk loud. So go ahead.
I've seen her in soccer games.
So I worked the legislative session this year, and our courts and our judges are under siege, as y'all know. That's why Bexar County is getting, a business court with appointed judges. Judicial pay rates failed. I testified in favor of it. But one of the observations that was being made is that Texas District Court judges, okay, and I don't talk that. Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The Texas District Court judges, both civil and criminal, but the observation by lawyer legislators is that, and they pick on the urbans all the time, is the expediency of rulings. And, your deadlines are running, and it may be a motion to compel or a motion for summary judgment or something, 2 to 3 weeks I get, but 3 to 6 months that starts to impact the case and the litigant. So what are your thoughts about, I understand having to research, making sure that you're making the right decision, you're not going to get reversed, confidence in the ruling. What are your thoughts about, because y'all have all practiced, so what are your thoughts about expediency of rulings?
So I think I'll go first, and I deal with this all the time, not particularly in Bexar County, but all over the state. And, I am one that understands, when we have to wait for a summary judgment, it holds up the case. And so a lot of times it's like, you don't want to call the court because you're afraid that they'll just deny your motion or rule against you because you're calling to check on it. But that's one thing that, I can't promise the outcome of a ruling for you, but you will get a timely ruling from me. And again, a couple weeks maybe for a complicated issue, and letting the attorneys know that. So when you tell the attorneys, I'm going to take this under advisement, giving them just an approximate amount of time so that they know, is this a matter of days, a matter of weeks? It definitely shouldn't be months.
Ms. Ramirez?
Yes, so I know in the local rules, lawyers are expected to have their proposed orders within a few weeks. And I think, that's in the local rules, so we probably should try to hold ourselves to that standard. However, I understand that sometimes there's more complicated cases. But I think, one of the big complaints about lawyers is communication. So, calling the court or the court communicating with them saying, I'm still working on it. It's on my desk, whatever it might be, just communication to let them know that their ruling hasn't been forgotten and that it's in process. But I think that the local rules are there for a reason as a guide. And so if it's a guide for us lawyers, then it should be a guide for judges as well.
Ms. Martinez?
Thank you. Yes, I agree that rulings should be handled very quickly, but I am an advocate for getting it right. So if it does need to go under advisement, which again, when you hear under advisement, typically that's the judge either going through the pleadings, researching the case. It may even go to the staff attorney. I get a lot of those under advisements. Can you analyze this? Can you look at the case law? So there's no reason why a judge's note should be 3 to 6 months late. Absolutely no reason. But there could be a reason why it may be a week or two. But it is my full intention to give everybody a ruling that complies with the law, taking into account the arguments before the court, the moving papers, and case law. So I'm going to diligently resolve the issue and give that to the attorneys in an appropriate time period, but it will never be 6 months.
All right, one more question if there's any more. Yes. Yes, Torres.
What will you miss the most about Judge Canales?
I object. Overruled. Oh, who said that? Was that Miss Middles? No. Miss Ramirez, you can start. When did this become a roast?
So, what I remember, one of my memories of Judge Canales was when he was before he was on the bench, and he was running, and he had mentioned to me that, hey, I'm going to run for the bench. We were on the second floor when presiding was on the second floor of the Bexar County Courthouse, and he had his little briefcase, and he was dashing into a court that's not even there anymore because they knocked off that whole part of the courthouse, but he was dashing into court, and literally dashing, like he was running into court, and he was so excited about the prospect of being a judge. And so to me, you know, it was just an exciting time, and so I realized how important it was to him and how much it meant to him, and also that he understood the big shoes that he had to fill, because you know, Judge Mireles had been there for so long and was such a staple of the courthouse, and so I know he had all of that in his mind. And not that I can read your mind, that's not my superpower, but I could tell how exciting you were you know, how excited you were about it. So
Thank you. Ms. Martinez?
Judge Canales, what I'm going to miss the most about you is the example that you have set in treating staff. Judge Canales has one of the biggest hearts, and he treats staff like royalty. And I'm going to miss that the most. But thank you for imparting that lesson on me, because without our staff, without the clerks, the staff attorneys, the people that make this court happen, we would not be able to do the job that we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Villaseñor Hernandez.
Well, I have many memories of going into Judge Canales' courtroom as a young attorney, and I always had this sigh of relief when I got assigned to Judge Canales as a young attorney, because there were plenty of judges that could make a young attorney feel really, really small, and he wasn't one of those. He was always so patient. In fact, I think one time he even told my boss to let me argue instead of him. And so after that, it was, you know, it gave me the confidence whenever I walked in there. And I remember a case. It was a very complicated arbitration issue, and I argued it before Judge Canales, and he took it under advisement for a couple of weeks, and then he called the attorneys back in and was very respectful in denying my motion and said, I know you're going to take it up on appeal. And I said, yes, Judge, I am. And so every time we would see each other, he said, I'm still waiting on that ruling. I'm still waiting to see if I did the right thing. But it was because of judges like Judge Canales that young attorneys I know here in Bexar County are able to feel better about themselves and know that you know, eventually they'll get to be, you know, successful attorneys.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for that wonderful question, Judge Torres. Well, I'm going to hand the microphone over. Thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you again. On behalf of MABA San Antonio, I want to thank everyone for coming out, particularly Ms. Mireles again for coming out this evening. Thank you. So glad to have you here tonight. Judge Canales, thank you so much also, sir, for having the moderation. I'd also like to thank our candidates for being here tonight. As I mentioned when we started this evening, the goal here was really so that you could have an informed decision to make about who you're going to vote for. And I think, especially today, in today's political climate, that you could have three awesome candidates willing to sit down civilly and talk about the issues. It's really wonderful. Thank you for coming. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.